So I think we should start. And hello, everyone. My name is Ilaria Parodi of the International Schools team at Pearson, and I would like to give you a warm welcome to today's webinar. And we're delighted to have you here to talk about biology for the IB diploma program. Shortly, I'll be introducing our speakers, but before I do so, I would like to draw your attention to the slide on the screen. There are a couple of housekeeping matters to highlight. If you need to talk to us as we go along with the webinar, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please pop them in the chat box and we'll aim to resolve them for you. If you would like to pose questions on today's webinar, put them in the chat box as well. There will be time for questions at the end of the webinar, and I know some of you have already submitted their questions, so we've made a note of those. We go through all your questions at the end of the webinar. And for the Q&A session today, our IB publisher, Dr. Catherine Barber, is going to join our speakers. Catherine, not only she's our IB publisher at Pearson, but she's also an IB alumna, so you'll be in very good hands then. The webinar today is going to last for about 50 minutes to an hour and is being recorded, and the recording will be available from our website after the end of the webinar. And now, without further ado, I am delighted to introduce our speakers. Alan Damon, Randy McDonegal, and William Ward. Alan teaches biology and theory and knowledge in Paris at the École Active Bilingue Janine Manuel. He's committed to integrating technology into the classroom and promoting critical thinking skills. Randy McGonigal has been teaching for 40 years, the last 28 as an IB biology instructor. He has consulted on implementing and improving many IB programs in North America, and he has led over 90 IB workshops. William Ward has taught for 41 years, spending 23 of those teaching IB diploma biology. He has led over 60 IB biology workshops and has consulted with many schools in establishing the IB curriculum or in improving IB instruction at existing IB schools. And now I'm going to hand the time over to Alan, Bill, and Randy. Alan, Bill, and Randy, over to you now.
Okay, thanks, Ilaria. So welcome to our participants. We encourage you to say hello in the chat and let us know. You can put hello in any language you feel appropriate, one that you feel comfortable with. Maybe let us know where you're tuning in from, what city and what country. Last time we did this, we had quite a wide variety of folks from all over the world. So today's focus obviously is going to be looking at some of the big changes to watch out for in the new curriculum. We have a little bit of experience with this because we got a sneak peek at the guide about a little over a year ago, since we're authors for the Pearson books. The IB lets us get started a little bit early, so we'll be going through some of the big things to watch out for starting in September. And maybe, yeah, Bill or Randy, you want to start us off?
Age first, Randy.
Okay. All right. So, welcome to everybody. You know, it is still morning where I am, and Bill also. So if you see me sipping coffee, it's only because my head will slump over if I don't. As Alan said, we have been working with this curriculum for quite a while now, and your main guidance, as it has always been, is the guide. And as with every curriculum change, you're going to find the nuts and bolts of what your life, your daily life in the classroom needs to be all about, as we'll discuss several ways during this webinar. There's all kinds of different ways this can be presented and all kinds of different order that the curriculum as a whole can be managed. And we'll talk about some of those possibilities, but it's going to be up to you to decide what's going to best work for you. And we're not going to spend too much time today talking about the details of the new assessment format, but we'll bring it up a little bit. And for the most part, it is very similar to what teachers and students have experienced in the past, but there are some changes that you'll need to be aware of. So what we're going to do today primarily is talk about the curriculum itself and how the new Pearson textbooks follow that curriculum, and how we manage to turn the curriculum part of the guide into the textbook.
And yeah, a little caveat that we are not the IB, right? So we didn't write this program. We're just humble authors. But since we've been working on it quite in a lot of detail in terms of transforming it into the book, the books, the HL book and the SL book, it's hopefully we'll be able to bring some insights. So if you want to find the original, actual, real stuff, the good news is that the IB has already put up everything on MyIB. And for each subject, chemistry and biology and physics, they've got this nice little setup with the actual guide, and then some suggestions for how to teach it, and then what the changes are in the assessment. So don't hesitate to check out MyIB. All right, roadmap. Bill, you want to attack the roadmap?
The one thing, as authors, I think all three of us were rather surprised at the approach, the difference in the approach, which was mostly a conceptual change. When we were writing the book and you have a conceptual guidance type of situation that IB provided us with this curriculum, it kind of gets interesting as far as to decide, okay, what am I going to put in? What am I going to leave out? Because when you look at IB, they tried to provide us with a road, so to speak. You've got themes, you've got levels of organization, you've got those two major organizations that you can look at. And what's really interesting is, as we put this together as authors, I think we all saw, as Randy mentioned briefly, there's a number of different pathways that can be taken in the teaching of your course based on your expertise, your student situation. Certainly, you can bring in a lot of local information as far as when you have a conceptual approach to biology. It gets rather interesting as far as the leeway you have as to bringing in ideas. The textbook, we tried to do that in a number of, get the student thinking outside of just specifics. And I think that is a key point that will allow students to get a better understanding and grasp of the overall subject of biology. So this new content organization based on themes and levels of organization is quite interesting. And I think you'll find that both you and your students will find quite a bit of time looking at this roadmap and deciding probably the best approach to take for you.
Yeah, and I was just at an IB workshop in Latvia, and they were mentioning there's a lot of kind of panic in the room about, oh my gosh, where do I start? Can I start at A1 and just go linearly? And well, that's what we did with the book. We just presented it the same way that the program is, so that it's easy to find chapters when you're looking for them. but I don't think the IB in any way intended for this to be a teaching order. It is a roadmap in the sense that you can literally start anywhere and you can finish anywhere, up to you. So I tend to teach it from kind of smaller things. Here we have the column of molecules and then cells all the way up to ecosystems. I tended to always start with kind of cells and molecules and kind of work my way up, but it is true that there are some teachers who start with ecosystems and then get down to the nitty gritty, zooming in instead of zooming out. So what's nice about this is that literally, teachers can choose whatever order they want to go into and jump back and forth. My personal experience in teaching is that I find that we teachers are really worried about, oh, am I following a logical sequence? Does it make sense for the students? And the students don't care. The students just want to know what's going to be on the test. Do I need to memorize this part here? And the big overarching things are fun to talk about, and that's what's nice about the roadmap, is it does show how these things are connected. And later we'll talk about linking questions, which is also another way of connecting everything. But in the end, I don't think we need to worry too much about, am I doing this in a way that that students, that it makes sense to students. I think that's much more of a worry for us and for things like course outlines when we're writing a course outline, that should make sense somehow. But think about what kids do on their cell phones. They jump from their email to cat videos to Instagram to, and their brains are all over the place. They're not looking for connections between things and big overarching themes. All right, so yeah, there's a lot of encouragement for I think freedom and schools to do things in whatever the order they feel fit, feel is correct. I think it fits best with things like logistics. Like if I'm going to do a flower dissection, it would be silly to do it in February when flowers are outrageously expensive at the flower shop, or I'll just wait for the spring and take some from my garden. Or are we going on a field trip, and therefore I should make sure I cover this particular section before we go on the field trip? I think those are much more interesting questions to ask about where to start and where to go. So here's one big thing: the options are gone. Now they're not really gone. They're a lot of things have just been moved to the core or to the AHL material. So, for example, knockout genes was one of the things that I was writing in chapter D1. So it used to be an option B. So those of you who are like, oh no, option B is gone, well, some of it has been moved. So the section on mutation and gene editing has the stuff about knockout genes. They have promised us for years that they would make the IB syllabus less content heavy. So they seem to have come across with that, or come through with that promise. But I have the impression that for every 3 things they took out, they add 2. So instead of being 20% less heavy, which was kind of like a fantasy number that we all were hoping for, someone calculated that's more like 6%, if you count the number of understandings and skills and things like that. One thing that is new is linking questions, and I think we've already done this. And that's the other thing too about the roadmap, is I feel like we teachers have already done this kind of thing. Like, who hasn't talked about form and function? Let's be honest, right? It's one of the themes on the roadmap, but we've all talked about that. Anyway, so linking questions, I think we've already done this. If we're good teachers, this is just a way of kind of making it a bit more formal. So an example is, for what reasons is heredity an essential feature of living things? That might help students to kind of bring together several different concepts or chapters in one. And then the other thing is the guiding questions. So these are kind of like the bigger overarching questions to I hope show students that why it's important to learn these things, right? So biology is not just memorizing a whole bunch of facts and saying, okay, well, just memorize these for the test and you're done. There should be a bigger picture. There should be a why. Why are we learning all this? Why is this important, and how is this coherent with the bigger picture? And again, we teachers have been doing this for years, so it's only new because it shows up on the syllabus, but it's not new to us as teachers. And the other thing to take into consideration is these are the ones that the IB has presented, but we are encouraged to write our own as well, our own linking questions and our own guiding questions. Yeah, anything to add to that, or we'll just go to the next slide?
Yeah, I think the linking questions are something where depending on the order that you choose, if you think back to the roadmap we were just looking at, everybody's going to have to say, based on the order I've chosen, what background do they have for this new topic, and what background do I need to provide so that the new topic will, have the filters that they need in order to understand the material. So, linking questions there are some provided that were part of the curriculum, and I think there's going to be many, many others that teachers are going to have to basically ask themselves, as well as occasionally truly asking students and discussing it with students.
All right. Assessment. Bill, you want to try that one, or I can go? Or?
The assessment, as Randy said earlier, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the assessment. That's going to come with a lot of detail coming from IB. You'll see specimen papers coming down the pipe that's going to indicate what you're going to need to focus on to prepare your students for the exams. It'll be explained in great detail. The thing is, our textbook, we made sure we put practice questions into the chapters, which are going to be IB style questions. We have exercises within each of the chapters, and that allows the student to continually examine where they are. And that's our way of detouring them supposedly to the path of extreme success in biology, because we want them to always see what they need to know and how far away are they to understanding and comprehending the material. So this assessment is, as we as teachers know, is continually in place. And that's when IB gives us the exact specimen papers and a little more detail, there is a decrease. There's no longer a paper 3, which to me, I like. I like the idea that there are now going to be just 2 papers. There doesn't seem to be anything totally new. There's still going to be database questions, which we're all familiar with. And our students, I know we make them comfortable with our laboratories and our everyday activities that involve analysis of data in the classroom. So there's nothing really new here. The so-called collaborative science project is simply a change in name, so to speak, for the Group 4 project. There are a few differences, but not many for the CSP. So I don't think we have to worry too much about the assessment aspect.
Agreed. Yeah, it's mostly just shuffling things around. So for example, everyone remembers the current paper 3 had 2 parts to it. The first part everybody had to do, that was database questions on laboratory or experimental questions. So showing like famous experiments, and students had to comment on it, or showing some data and they had from results of an experiment and they had to comment on that. That is now this paper 1B. So that'll look familiar. It's just that it's not called paper 3. It's now called paper 1B. And 1A is exactly the same as always, multiple choice questions for paper 1. The big difference is, since this 1B, students are allowed their calculator, and since students are going to be handed both packets at the beginning of the paper 1 session, they can do it in any order they want, and they can take as much time or as little time on either paper as they want. Since they are allowed a calculator there, they now will be allowed a calculator on paper 1. I don't think that makes any difference at all, but that's just a little technical thing. Paper 2 will be very, very similar. No, we're not going to see any huge differences with paper 2. All right. So the IA is a little different, but again, a lot of teachers are going to see, that this is not a totally foreign thing. It's brand new out of nowhere. The one thing that's obviously gone here is the personal engagement, and that's sad to go because we were all so passionate about reading, or so interested in about reading. How passionate students have always been about photosynthesis since their early childhood days. I've always liked yogurt. You know, these these things that kids say that try to get the points for, you know, and the IB didn't really like it after a certain number of years because they realized, wow, it's really impossible to assess, right? So students were, it wasn't really very useful for distinguishing between those students who were truly showed some engagement and those who didn't. So now it's simplified down to just 4 criteria. You'll notice that there's the communication criterion looks like it's missing, but they've slid some things back in here about units and things like that. So there is a little bit of, since they're all equal, they're all 6 points. There's a little bit of maybe a redistribution of how heavy each one is worth. Some might feel like they're worth more now, and others maybe feel like they're worth less. But basically, no one's going to panic and say, "Oh my gosh, this is completely different," and how am I going to get used to this? The big difference is now students can do under certain circumstances. There are certain rules they have to follow, but they can do some group work. So up to 3 students could work together, but it has to be each student must have a separate research question and must process their own data and things like that. So there's very specific rules about that. At the workshop, a lot of people said they're not going to do that. They're just going to keep with individual work. But some schools, just because of the lab situation they have or whatever, might realize that, you know, like there are some schools in the US where they have no lab technician and they have, you know, 35 kids, and they just don't have the space and the time to have everybody do an individual investigation.
I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Alan, if you could go back to that slide in just a moment.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting for us to consider the evolution of the IA over the years, and it wasn't that many iterations ago that we had 5 criteria, as I recall, and conclusion and evaluation was one of those. And they were, the 2 of those were evaluated together. And as being one of 5, that meant together, the 2 of them were 20% of what the students, you know, were being judged by. And now conclusion and evaluation are, number 1, each a full category, and number 2, by both being in there, that's 50% of what students are being assessed. And I don't know about everybody else, but those sections, those skills of students making and writing good conclusions and making and writing good evaluation sections, those are difficult things for students to do. And the only way that they're going to do well is to have lots of practice being asked to do those things, because with it now being 50% of their marks, if they just sort of, you know, write a brief conclusion and write that they had fun doing it as their evaluation, they are going to be getting very, very low marks for those 2 sections. So my point is they need to be a big part of the investigation training that goes into the classwork and the lab work, in other words. Thank you.
And that reminds me, there are no longer prescribed labs, so there's a lot more kind of freedom that schools have to do the labs that they can do with the equipment that they have and the time they have. Instead, there's a list of required skills. Yep. But again, teachers looking through that list of skills are not going to be shocked and oh my gosh, how am I going to get through all this? It's the same stuff we've always seen: chromatography, microscope work, you know, magnification, whatever. Yeah. All right, so rest assured, all of this is, of course, in our lovely third edition of the book, and we've kept some of the features that worked well in the previous books in terms of practice questions, as we mentioned earlier, boxes that show little kind of interesting facts on the side, links between sections, and links to activities or labs that relate to a certain topic. So we've tried to keep a lot of the successful features from previous editions, but then also add things like the linking questions, the guiding questions. One thing that unfortunately is missing from the present, the new guide, which is present in the current guide, is the links to TOK. So we definitely kept those in the books, but unfortunately they're gone from the syllabus. The reasoning behind that, I actually talked to the guy who wrote them, the TOK links, is that the IB didn't want it to feel like these are the only ones you need to know. They want students and teachers to make their own TOK connections. So rest assured, yeah, as I said earlier, we were presenting the book in the same way that the IB has presented the roadmap. Students and teachers can go in whatever order they feel comfortable with, and if they feel like they're missing a piece of information and from something, they can always jump back to a previous section or jump ahead to a future section. But it's kind of cool, the themes and the levels of organization. It's a neat way of kind of seeing the big picture, and then you fill in the blocks as you go. And I'm just gonna, like, for example, I will, when I give an assignment for saying, by next Tuesday have B42 read, then everyone knows where it is, and we'll go from there. All right,
Alan,
who wants to do this one?
Alan, I think you made a good point earlier about the order. The teaching order matters much more to the teacher than it does to students. I encourage everyone to have that roadmap right out in front of you, printed copy, whatever you want, an online copy, whatever, and just use it as almost a checklist. And we, as we've said, that you can choose your own order, but there really is no reason why it can't just be done in the order that it is. We're encouraging and we want everybody to make that choice for themselves, but we're not really discouraging people just starting at the A1 and working your way forward. And that's what the book does. When we sat down and made decisions about the formatting and the sequencing of the book, we had no way of knowing what order teachers would prefer. And so we felt like staying with this order would at least give them a way of checking the guide, the details of the guide versus the book versus the roadmap. And so that's the way you'll find the textbook is in the same order as the roadmap.
And then Ilaria mentioned it in the introduction, but this text is fully approved by the IB, so we've had them kind of reading over our shoulder and giving us tips and hints and suggestions for how to make sure it fits what the IB is expecting. So, all right, anyone want to tackle this one?
Just a tremendous response to this. And nature of science has been a major part of our curriculum for, was for the last curriculum as well as this one again. And I think it's very important because it ties the subject, first of all, together within the subject itself. And then more importantly, though, I think it allows the attachment of biology to the world of science in general. And you'll see that mentioned in the book with boxes periodically and treatment that allows evidence of science investigation in general taking place within our particular subject, and the benefits of it and the ways to go about that type of research and data gathering, all the things that go along with hopefully being able to come up with conclusions that are valid and meaningful. So this was an important thing to do as far as adding these text boxes to the side with Nature of Science, with TOK links. You'll find the TOK boxes all have, the basis of them will be questions. As Alan mentioned, there weren't specific TOK questions written for this particular curriculum, but we as authors, we wrote questions that would open the student's mind, hopefully, toward that inquisitive attitude we want our students to have towards science, and even questioning the science approach in many cases. So we have all kinds of little features that we've added in on the text to add to the total experience of science by the student, and hopefully by the teacher as well.
And we tried, although I hope we got them all, but we tried to put, anytime there was a new important word like mitochondrion or something, we tried to put that in bold. I hope we didn't skip any. And the other thing too about the text boxes for the TOKs, we tried to also make sure that when we could, to stick one of the new prompts, because obviously the new TOK guide has the 35 prompts that students are supposed to be using for their exhibition, for the IA and TOK. And I tried to also mention, if I could find like an object that they could eventually consider as an object for the exhibition. And by the way, yeah, for me, yeah, go ahead.
If I could, Alan, just mention, I guess, to kind of give you a compliment, you wrote the section on TOK at the end of the text, which
Right.
I feel is an outstanding section that might be a good place for the students to begin the year with, to begin their biology trip with, because I think it's extremely well written, and I think they will refer to it time and time again as they go through the course.
Don't tell anyone it was the chapter I had the most fun writing.
It was great.
I'm supposed to be focusing on the biology, but yeah, the TOK is so much fun. And the other thing to note about the Nature of Science, it could show up in the exams. It could be on a paper too somewhere, but students are not expected to like memorize it as new content. They're just supposed to kind of see a bigger picture in how like science works, and it should come organically. It shouldn't be something they should be learning on top of the biology, but they definitely should see that, the how science works, and how, when they study an example of a theory that gets replaced by another theory due to lack of evidence or brand new evidence that comes up that refutes it, that they should see that as a Nature of Science thing. Okay. Other examples, yeah. So these are just some of the examples of the boxes we've had. So we put in there. So just to give you, a taste of the kinds of things that'll be in there. And so there's not one necessarily every single page, but definitely we hope in each chapter there's a few of each. Some of them are interesting facts. Some of them are, do we have examples of those as well? Oh yeah, some of them are skills. So we'll have like a link to a specific activity that they can do on the ebook, because there's some stuff that just didn't fit in the paper version of the book. So if there's an exercise or a lab or something that will help them to build a skill, obviously I mentioned chromatography before. Here is an activity on surface area to volume ratio. So on the electronic version of the book, if they click on that icon, they will get to an electronic activity. And the key facts are there to kind of remind them what the main idea is for a particular topic. Sometimes we have interesting facts as well. So again, I think that these are fun to just kind of show how it's not just theory, right? We're learning this because these concepts, these ideas, these examples have real life uses, and we study biology to hopefully make sense of things, but also to apply our knowledge to useful things. yeah, here's some examples of, yeah, so hint for success is more for like students, you know, a little boost for, you know, traps to avoid falling into, or don't worry about this, you won't be tested on that. That kind of helps kids realize that they don't have to absolutely memorize everything. We have to memorize a lot, but and then, yeah, we just like with the previous editions of the book, we're peppering the chapters with not only revision questions and practice exercises, but past paper questions for stuff that is still from the previous syllabus. And then when we didn't have stuff from previous exams, because it's new stuff, we would write our own questions, but try to keep the command terms and the style of the IB in the question. And then these are in there too, once in a while, kind of challenge yourself as a little exercise to kind of build some skills.
Alan, if I could mention the in the hints for success, some of those are given within the guide, and some of those are just what we three authors know from, you know, many years of teaching IB, and, you know, the types of questions, the level of questions, how far, how much detail will the topic require, etc. So I know this is a strange thing to brag about, but between the three of us, there's probably somewhere around perhaps a little more than 100 years of teaching IB that, you know, I know that if I was especially a teacher in my first 5 years of teaching, when the learning curve, teaching IB, when the learning curve is very, very steep, I would very much appreciate those hint for success boxes.
Yep. Yep.
Most of those 100 years are from Mr. Ward, by the way.
It feels it. Yeah.
We'll give him a chance to talk about the illustrations then.
The illustrations, I really feel sorry for the artists at Pearson, because I have seen some of Randy's work in workshops, and I've seen what he's put up on whiteboards and boards as far as to explain various concepts to the IB teachers in the workshop. And I can just imagine probably what was sent into those artists for them to make sense out of, so that you would be able to see them and understand what they were trying to get across. I'm sure Alan and I, the illustrations we presented were probably not a challenge at all to those artists, but certainly it is a unique situation as far as everyone's a little bit different. Right side, left side of brain. Yeah, that's always interesting as far as which one we try to appeal to both sides with this book. We have, in other words, we have a lot of illustrations, and I think they're very good illustrations that will help clarify to the student what they are expected to know. A picture's worth 1,000 words, the old Chinese proverb, and it's really true. And we tried to utilize that particular thought process in this book. So when you see the illustrations, a lot of work went into them, and a lot of thought went into them to make them such that they would be meaningful to the students as well as to the teacher.
Yeah, and I think it's a good example of teamwork, because an artist will see things in one way and think that this is important, and it is true, like the choice of colors and things like that, whereas I wouldn't even think about that. Whereas we, the scientists, were like, well, we really have to show this detail and that detail. So there was quite a bit of back and forth, and can you tweak this, and can you add this, and but yeah, the end product I think is quite good. Notice how I said end product when we're talking about enzymes here. Okay. Here's something new. Who wants to do this one?
I will. What you're going to find at the end of each chapter, again, thinking back to the roadmap, for example, a chapter would be A1, or B3 or something like that. And at the end of each of those chapters, what we will have done is taking the earlier guiding question that we would have, laid out what those guiding questions were as given by IB at the beginning of the chapter. But now at the end of the chapter, we give the guiding question again, and then in a bullet list summarized what the main points were that best illustrated what that guiding question was all about. And so it's, how teachers and students use this is up to them. But it's always good to go back and revisit and rethink concepts where you look at the complete picture and not the minutia of detail that has led to that picture. And so you'll find that at the end of each chapter, each guiding question revisited in the same way that you're looking at in this slide.
Maybe with students who are following the course at SL. So we've done our best. Again, I hope we haven't skipped anything here, but I'm pretty sure we had so many people checking that I think we're good. Anything that's HL only is the AHL material is flagged, so that if a student who is only following it SL has the HL book, they don't need to worry about that. Yeah. Okay. That's what I just said. So I jumped ahead. So that's true in the index, or not the index, the table of contents. Sorry. So this is theme D, D41 natural selection. So anything that's not flagged is for everybody. It's the core, and then anything that's flagged HL is just for the AHL material. That's true for the for the practice questions as well. Any like multiple choice questions at the end of the chapter, they'll be flagged if it's HL content only, so students don't waste their time if they're following the course at SL. Oh, there it is again. So yeah, these would be multiple choice for everybody, and then question 4 and 5 and 6 would be just for the HL. And by the way, all the answers, I think that's one of the questions that came to us before the presentation. All the answers to these can be found in the electronic version of the book. We're finishing that up and doing the last bits of answers, and that will be available very soon. The paper versions of the book are already available and can be ordered. I've got mine on my desk somewhere here, but the electronic version is coming soon to a place near you where books are not banned. Okay, right, and then yeah, we've added, as we did last time in the previous previous 2 editions, right? Yeah, TOK obviously in biology, so an entire chapter just on thinking about TOK as a biologist. So it is true that biology is a subset of the natural sciences, which is one of the big areas of knowledge in TOK. But biology and, well, I guess, yeah, biology in general would be the natural sciences, and then medicine, there's a lot of stuff about human health and things like that. Medicine is part of the human sciences in TOK. An entire chapter on the internal assessment. So teachers who are worried about meeting the criteria, or which skills should I use, and which labs and things like that, there's a whole chapter just on that. So the criteria for the internal assessment, and then skills, and then of course a chapter on the extended essay for students who are interested in doing an EE in biology. Although more and more they're encouraging students, we are certainly at our school encouraging students to do world studies extended essay. EE world studies. All right, who wants to do digital resources? Maybe Bill.
I'm looking at Randy, and what do you think, Randy? I'll do the first 3, you do the last 2. The full answers to the practice questions are going to be in the digital resource guide, as Alan mentioned. I'd like to mention something about those answers. Whenever you provide answers to practice questions, there's oftentimes going to be questions come up, disagreement about some of the answers. As a teacher, I always welcomed that. I always felt that the answers, if they're a little bit different from what the student or even the teacher thought was correct, that was a good thing because it would get the students thinking a little bit more about that particular question and going into and looking at it in a different way. So there will be, I just want to put this in now, there will be questions sometimes about some of the answers I'm sure that Alan, Randy, and I provided, but indeed, I think you would find that they are accurate in their own way. And that needs to be presented to the students so they understand that in some cases, there aren't just black and white answers, so to speak, to the whole biological aspect of science. Videos, I was one of the authors, I was dragging my feet. I just felt the students were probably better at using the internet than I. But we did go through and we did find some very excellent videos that we added to the digital resource so that the students would have at least a starting point to look at as far as videos to prepare them for the exam. Worksheets and labs, those took a lot of time to make sure they fulfill the skill levels that are required as far as for students within the subject. We put a lot of effort into those, and most of the labs I believe you will find are doable that we provided in actually settings that don't have a lot of money and or equipment. Randy, I'll turn the other ones over to you then.
Let me make a comment about what you were referring to with the sometimes debatable answers to questions and relate that specifically to the bullet having to do with command terms. A lot of times what students need to do is realize that they are limited in their answers to whatever the command term is asking them to do. And whatever they write that is sort of off base on that command term doesn't make it wrong information, but IB does not mark on things that are wrong versus right. They give credit for things that are correct and do follow the command term that is being asked. So that's why Bill said he welcomed questions and discussions that had to do with that. It is those discussions that get across to students why a particular answer is suitable according to this command term and why this other answer that may very well be true, it just is not useful for the command term that's being used. And there was a time where that was, I don't know if the right word is easier, but it was more upfront in teaching because the curriculum was provided by way of command terms. And now the curriculum is a bit more open-ended, but the testing is still done by way of command terms. And so teachers need to make sure that those command terms are being worked on regularly and not just wait until the review time period before the IB test and then say, here's a list of the command terms that are going to be used and how you should manage them. If it's a 2-year program, then those command terms need to be worked on throughout. And so anyway, that was my comment on that.
And the last bullet point.
We have provided auto-marked quizzes. These will be in the way of not free response, but by making a choice about something, whether it be a true multiple choice or some version of a multiple choice. And I personally don't see those as things that are useful for teachers for evaluation of students. I think they are best used for students to evaluate themselves, what they have read and what meanings it has, etc. And, if they read through a section and they get only 3 or 4 out of 10 quiz questions correct, then it tells them I need to go back and redo that reading.
Although the kind of kids who usually do those quizzes and quiz themselves are usually the ones who get the 8 and 9 out of 10 anyway. All right. Is that about wrapping it up? Let's see. Yeah, so we have a chat box for those of you who are interested in in typing in some questions. Feel free to do so. We did receive some questions in advance. Was Ilaria going to read those out to us, or yeah?
I can, Alan. So I think you answered a lot of them. There've been quite a few questions about book and resources availability, which you did kind of mention, but just to reiterate, so the books are available in the warehouse, you can order them. The ebooks are also live, but they are just the ebooks at the moment, and we are adding the extra resources such as the lab worksheets, the auto mark quizzes, the answers, etc. All of those extra resources will be live by August. We're just kind of adding them gradually as they're ready. We have made the higher level answers available on the website because we haven't had a chance to add them to the ebook yet, and Ilaria will put a link. Yes, she's done that now. There's a link there, and we'll add the standard level ones soon as well, but they will also be added to the ebook. And we also will add a link to how to contact your local salesperson for your ordering needs and questions. So I think that covers availability. There was a question about incorporating, linking and guiding questions into unit planning and how you do that.
Yeah, was that the one with ManageBack as well?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so our school used ManageBack for a while, and then we've kind of moved away from it. So I don't have a super precise answer, but I can say 2 things about ManageBack. Number one, they are so on top of things usually that my guess is that they're way ahead of everyone on this, and they've already got everything ready to go live, or it might already be live. So I'm sure they've taken into consideration where to put linking questions, where to put guiding questions, how to use the new roadmap. I'm sure they're way ahead of all of us. They probably even have I know that, for example, BioNinja has already some suggestions for how to do the roadmap, which direction to start in and things like that. Teachers get all excited about these things, but then when you actually sit down and do it, you're like, well, no, that's not going to work for me. But anyway, it's a good fun resource. So the first thing is that they're way ahead of things, and the second thing is my experience with ManageBack, because I was an IB coordinator for a while, is that if you contact them, they are super quick at responding. So if you realize, well, there's no place to put linking questions, they'll probably respond to you in about 6 minutes saying, okay, we'll put a team on it. And then by 24 hours later, there's going to be a place to put linking questions. So that's my plug for ManageBack. I think they're very competent people. I hope that answers the question. Yeah. Did I forget anything in that question?
No, I think that's good. And then there's been it's not a question, but Katerina just wanted to follow up on something that you said. So Katerina says, just to share that when you say that the teaching order matters more to the teachers than the students, she slightly disagrees. Students need knowledge background to understand other topics. For example, it makes no sense to teach evolution and speciation without natural selection, as teachers want to make clear the logical links between the topics. So yeah, not a question, just kind of extra thoughts on that.
Yeah, I totally understand, and I think that's the fun part of it being that open, is that the teacher who believes that it is important can do that, and the teacher who says not really. Like, for example, when scientists are first discovering things, they don't have all that background knowledge. So Darwin didn't know anything about genes or didn't know anything about natural selection, but he could look at homologous structures and things like that, and kind of piece it together. So there are some people who actually want the students to make their own little discoveries, and by giving all the background stuff, it's like a spoiler alert. So, you know, if we start talking about evolution, then we're like, well, wait, that doesn't make any sense. What's the mechanism? And then we get to natural selection, there can be that aha moment, and kids put it all together themselves, and they realize, wow, that's actually a brilliant explanation. Whereas if we start with natural selection, you're like, well, why are we studying this? Is this really important? Anyway, I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of realizing what, or thinking about what background is needed in order to understand a topic. So if you go in and decide this is the chapter order, the topic sequence that I want to do, then you just need to sit down and say, okay, what am I going to need to introduce first in order to study this topic? I know for me, when I was teaching, I always chose to teach anatomy and physiology topics first. It sort of grabbed students, so to speak. There were a lot of them that either were going on to medical careers, or at least at that time thought they were going on to medical careers, and many of them did. And it was a way of grabbing them. Well, when I did that, they had no background or little background other than their introductory biology course, usually in 9th grade. And I would have to say, okay, they don't know cell biology, they don't know molecular biology. So how is it that I'm going to explain the mechanism of insulin and the control that insulin has over our metabolism? And it would take me a while to do that. You know, I wouldn't teach all of molecular biology, but I would stop and teach some of it at that time. And I think it became useful for later on. Then when we did study molecular biology, it was one more example in their head as to what it truly was all about.
And very briefly, if I could just add, we in the chapters, we cross-reference material to other chapters in the book profusely, so that the student, if they did find that they were lacking some knowledge that they felt they needed, they could go to a particular chapter in the book that would explain it more. So I think it would be taken care of very nicely, whatever approach is taken by the teacher with those chapters.
And as long as you hit all the 16 boxes, you can go in any order you want. Yeah. That's a good point. Yes, because often we would say in the previous editions of the book, as you saw previously in this thing, well, no, we can't say that anymore because we don't know what chapter they've just done. So yeah, we just say, this was discussed further in this other thing if you're interested. Yeah. There was something else I was going to say. Anyway. Oh yeah, it's kind of like, this reminds me of like the debate, which cinemas and films seem to have made the decision. But remember back in like the early days of cinema, you'd have the credits in the beginning. So you'd know the names of all the actors, and you knew everything, and you knew all the sound technicians and everything. And now they put it at the end. So there's two different ways of doing things, and it depends on which one you like. Is one right and is one wrong? I don't know.
Yeah. So we're about out of time and out of questions. In addition to this webinar, we also have some 60-day free trials. You can access the ebook for 60 days for free. And there are also some sample unit plans and some sample chapters. So they are all on the website. Please do check them out. Thank you to our lovely authors, Alan, Randy and Bill, for another excellent webinar and for your insights. And thank you very much to everybody that joined. There is an email address in the chat, internationalschools@pearson.com, if you have any further questions for us that you would like us to pass on to our authors.
Perfect. Oh, and I
Thank you
remembered
very
one more
much.
thing I was going to say,
Oh.
which is the specimen papers are actually available. I have seen specimen papers for the new.
Oh, great.
So teachers are going to be find those very useful in the early teaching years.
Super.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. It's been fun.
Thank you very much. I think this concludes our webinar for today. So thank you to our authors again, and thank you to all of you for attending. That was great. And as mentioned in chat and also mentioned at the beginning, we will send you a link to the recording as soon as possible, so you will have that. And also, as Catherine mentioned, there's all contact details are in chat, but we also add them to the email that we will send you with a link to the recording. So thank you very much all, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.